she was a complete natural at writing, at conveying emotions through words. Fantastic. So she was a very intelligent, very gifted writer, but throughout her life she suffered from depression. Part of the focus of this depression was the restrictions that she felt were imposed upon her because she was a woman. The kind of mismatch between what she wanted to do and what she was expected to do. There's actually a book about Sylvia Plath called Pain, Parties and Work, which is about the time that she spent writing for a magazine, kind of like an intern for a magazine in the 1950s, I believe. I haven't read the book yet, but I do have it. And it describes things like how the female writers, were expected to dress a certain way, even though they were writers. Why does it matter what they look like when it's their writing that should be scrutinised? So it was that kind of thing. So she was a brilliant writer and very volatile character and very intense, emotional person, but she was also quite a cynical person, and she liked to describe things as they were in all the detail of the reality, and if it was something unpleasant, that's how she'd describe it. She wouldn't try to soften the description. She wanted to talk about the reality. So that's what a lot of her poetry is like. It's quite stark and, in a way, sometimes brutal in its imagery and the way that she describes things. So this was all very much informed by her depression and her character and her marriage with Ted Hughes, which itself was very volatile as well. And all of that really comes across in her writing and her poetry. And actually, in 1963, she actually committed suicide. And she was only 30 years old. But to have produced the body of work that she did in that time is absolutely amazing. So her stuff is definitely worth a read. Although actually I haven't read that much of it. The Bell Jar is probably her most famous novel, and I have that, but I haven't read that either. But what I have read is some of her poetry, so here I have an anthology of hers, and it's called The Colossus, which is named after the title of one of the poems inside it. And actually The Colossus is a very good poem. It's got some quite striking imagery, and the poem is all about her father, and it's got a lot of the images that she uses in lots of her poetry, images of bones and sort of animalistic imagery and obsession with the body and the parts of the body being described in isolation, so it sort of creates this disjuncture. And as you can imagine from the title, she's describing her father as a huge colossus, a huge statue, and describing parts of that statue. Aspects of those parts go to make up her father, or the image of her father that she has in her mind. So here it is, The Colossus. I shall never get you put together entirely, pieced, glued and properly jointed. Mule bray, pig grunt and bawdy cackles proceed from your great lips. It's worse than a barnyard. Perhaps you consider yourself an oracle, mouthpiece of the dead, or of some god or other. 30 years now I have laboured to dredge the silt from your throat. I am none the wiser. childbirths or a family barbecue. Any touch, taste, tangs fit for these outlaws to ride home on, and to sanctuary, usurping the armchair between tick and tack of the clock until we go, each skulled and cross-boned Gulliver, riddled with ghosts, to lie deadlocked with them, taking root as cradles rock. There's an interesting image there of death and birth in the same line, which is something that I've noticed she does quite a lot in her poems. So that was 2 poems by Sylvia Plath. It's definitely worth reading more of her poetry because it's so rich and interesting. There's all different anthologies that you can get, and you can always find something in them that'll make you stop and think. And as I said, her diaries are particularly good and well worth a look at. So I hope you enjoyed those poems, and I hope it makes you want to read a bit more Plath. Keep your suggestions